Hello everyone, and welcome to Anomalous Archive, where we post scary stories to help you sleep. Please comment where you are listening to my videos from, since I believe it would be fun for all of us to know. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's reach 50 subscribers until the end of this month. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. When my younger daughter was 11 years old, she began to fear sleeping alone in her room. She would ask me to leave the nightlight on and to tightly close the curtains, not leaving even the smallest gap. After I was done, she would check to ensure there were no cracks anywhere. "Laura, why do these curtains bother you so much?" I asked her one day. "I'm afraid of the skinless monster," my daughter replied. "What monster? Skinless?" I sat down on the edge of her bed, ready to listen carefully. "Yes, that's what I call him because he doesn't have skin, only meat," Laura whispered faintly. "And what does he want with your window?" I asked, looking in her frightened eyes. "I don't know. He hangs there and stares. Maybe he wants to take my skin and wear it." My daughter pulled the blanket up to her chin, as if trying to protect herself. "How about we put your tiger on the windowsill, and he'll guard you," I suggested, picking up her favorite stuffed toy from the chair. "Better give him to me," Laura said, taking the tiger, hugging it, and closing her eyes. I wanted to be the kind of adult who doesn't believe in monsters and dismisses everything as a child's vivid imagination. But, unfortunately, I believed her, because I remembered my own horrifying childhood all too well. Monsters exist. I've always known that. One of them hunted me in my youth. Laura is just a child. She could have had a bad dream. Or perhaps she heard a scary story at school. How could I tell if her words were fiction or reality? The skinless monster, there was something familiar about it. A similar story was told during my childhood. The kids spoke of a creature that would rip off people's skin and wear it like a costume. In the 90s, our city was flooded with such rumors. "Dad," my little girl screamed from her room. I rushed to her in fear. Laura was sitting on the bed, pointing at the window. "He's there right now. I can hear him," she yelled. The curtains were still tightly drawn, with no gaps between them. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of the nightlight. Laura kept her eyes fixed on my face. I didn't want to show that I was scared too. Suppressing my own fear, I took 2 steps forward, grabbed the curtains, and pulled them apart. "Phew, there's no one here. Look for yourself, Laura. There's no monster," I said. "He was just there. He was climbing the wall and then breathing like this." She stuck out her tongue, mimicking wild, erratic breathing. I pulled back the sheer curtain and looked closely at the glass. On the outside, a faint, murky trace of condensation was fading. Laura hadn't lied. Someone had been outside the window just seconds ago. Someone had been breathing on the glass. Long streaks, like finger marks, remained on the dusty windowsill. Many of them. Someone had been gripping the metal ledge, scratching the paint. But who could climb up to the 7th floor? "Don't be afraid, Laura. Dad will protect you from any monster," I said, though I didn't entirely believe it myself. Every parent thinks they can shield their child, but is that really the case? Not everyone can even imagine the dangers that threaten children. I barely slept that night, constantly checking on my daughter. She slept peacefully, curled up under the blanket, hugging her plush tiger. From that moment on, the illusion of calm shattered like a stage backdrop, and the terrifying world reappeared before me. I had long since stopped reading alarming news on principle, but when necessary, the news finds its way to us. In another part of the city, near the train station, human bones were found, gnawed clean, and not just anywhere, but in a dumpster. For me, it was a sign that the nightmare was returning. Child eater. That's what they called the creature that hunted me when I was a teenager. A tall, terrifying woman. I remembered her as if I had seen her yesterday. Her black hair, her bulging eyes, and her raspy laughter. She had almost dragged me into her maw, but I pulled my hand away and smashed her skull with my cassette player. It happened on Foxglove Street. In the 90s, there was so much talk about that mysterious place. Some said the street didn't exist. Others insisted it had been there and then disappeared. But all those stories ended as suddenly as they began. We grew up, and our nightmares seemed to dissolve into thin air. They remained as strange memories of a distant past, with no consequences for the present. Why? Why did it end back then, and why has it returned now? We endured the trial, and now it's our children's turn. Laura is so fragile and small. She doesn't even look like a fifth grader. Just a child. I had to protect her. Right on cue, I received a message from someone I hadn't spoken to since school. "Hi, Nolan. Do you remember me? I'm Everett. We used to talk when we were in school." In the photographs, there was a slim man with a gloomy face and gray hair. I would never have recognized him in real life if he hadn't introduced himself. Everett, that boy who loved playing video games. I had visited him a few times. We used to discuss our problems. I was nearly devoured by Child Eater, and he was almost strangled by someone called Uncle Smile. Then it all faded away, and our communication gradually dwindled. A whole lifetime has passed since then. "Hello, Everett." I remember, of course. I wrote back and stared at the screen, waiting for the next message. He couldn't have written just like that. Finally, Everett finished typing. "I have something important to discuss with you. It's about our past. A few of us are getting together. Can you come?" I was terribly anxious, but I knew I couldn't refuse. It concerned me and the others. There was something unfinished, merely postponed. Where and when? I replied without hesitation. This didn't feel like a classmates' reunion or an old friend's party. I wasn't invited to a cafe, but was asked to meet at Horizon Stadium, an overgrown place hidden in the shadow of a long-closed factory. Honestly, I thought it had been demolished long ago, but it was still standing and had hardly changed in the last couple of decades. The seats in the stands had been replaced, and the railings repainted. A light rain drizzled, and clouds churned in the sky. I entered the area and saw a crowd of familiar and unfamiliar faces. A bald man with a round face and a noticeable belly introduced himself as Benjamin. He looked tired and worn out by life. A man with scars on his cheek called himself Charles, and I immediately remembered him. We had once lived in the same building and even talked a little. I also remembered that he had a twin brother named Matthew. I recalled how Charles got those deep scars. After that, he became quiet and never talked about how he injured his face. In that group, there was also a woman, beautiful, well-groomed, in an expensive coat. Her name was Isabella. Everett couldn't take his eyes off her and stayed close to her. It was clear that he liked her. The leader of this group was a peculiar man with an unkempt long beard, wearing a shabby jacket, but with a piercing gaze. "My name is Arthur," he said to me in a hoarse voice, then glanced at the others and added, "Thank you for not being afraid to come." Not everyone had responded to the call. We were about to sit on the stands, but the plastic seats were covered in raindrops and wet leaves. So, we stood in a circle near the rusty football goal. I thought that our group looked odd from the outside. People in their 40s gathered at a stadium, standing around and discussing something. It might seem like we were planning to relive our youth and play a game under the light rain. "I've already explained everything to the others, but not to you," Arthur said, looking at me. "All of us are connected by the past, and we can't escape it until we do what needs to be done. I wouldn't have involved you if I could handle it alone. But unfortunately, I need help. Can you be more specific?" I asked. "In each of your childhoods, there was a nightmare, and you're here because you overcame it," Arthur explained. "I also had my enemy. I called him Reverse, my doppelganger from the mirror world. He's the one who brought the monsters. Maskmaker, Uncle Smile, Frostman, Child Eater. Who else? They're all his accomplices, and they all ended up in our world because of him. He's their anchor. We've lived our entire lives remembering them, said Charles, touching the old scars on his face, as if they still hurt. But just the other day, I saw sticky blue footprints on the road, and then I got a message. Why has it all started again? Apparently, all these years, this guy had been hiding some secret. As a child, he never mentioned the sticky footprints, and he never showed interest in my story. Suddenly, I wanted to ask him what had happened to him back then and who had scarred his face. But it wasn't the right time. We were listening to the bearded man in the worn jacket. Reverse got scared of us. He confidently replied to Charles' question. The double saw that we could handle the monsters, even on our own. The thought of us teaming up terrified him. He considered us dangerous enemies, so he went into hiding, waiting for us to forget everything. It seems he has grown bolder now and plans to take revenge for his humiliation. Because of him, I once lost my family, lost my home. He took over an entire neighborhood, turning it into a blurred boundary between reality and nightmare. Terrified by his threats, I wandered as a vagabond my whole life. But now, I'm not afraid of anything. I hope you won't be scared to go with me to Foxglove Street. We must return this scum to his world. If we succeed, all the nightmares will disappear. I thought about Laura. Could I risk putting myself in danger by embarking on such a risky journey? If something happened to me, my daughter would lose her parent. We're not so young anymore, Benjamin suddenly chuckled. Gray-haired, balding, with bad backs. It's a bit late for us to become heroes. We have kids, added Isabella. It seemed she was more afraid than the others. Arthur gave us a piercing look and said, "No one else can do this." On Foxglove Street, time has stopped. It's still the period of our childhood there. Only those who lived in the 90s can enter. For everyone else, the path is closed. I didn't know what to think or what decision to make. I couldn't leave my family. They didn't even know where I'd gone. But on the other hand, I couldn't let the nightmares take over our lives again. Now that I'm here, there's no turning back, I thought, looking at the others. It seemed that no one was planning to leave. Only Everett hesitated, looking into Isabella's frightened eyes. And what if we fail? According to rumors, that forgotten street is crawling with monsters, and we'll be wandering there in search of your double. We could be killed. Foxglove Street is a special place, Arthur replied. It's a nightmare and reality at the same time. Have you ever realized you're dreaming while in a dream? In those moments, you can control events. Think of our journey there as some kind of game. We're the heroes, and the monsters are the enemies. Imagine their weaknesses. Think of how you can defeat them, and then win. You have the right to refuse. Even if I have to go alone, I'll go. But whoever comes with me is a hero. Are we going there right now? I asked, as if I had already made my decision. Yes, it's not far from here, Arthur replied, glancing at the stadium exit. No one backed out or changed their mind. Everett, Isabella, and Benjamin followed Arthur along Pumpkin Hollow Road. The man remembered the way well, since it had once been his home. Our motley group walked through garages, overgrown bushes, and made our way through courtyards and alleys. I couldn't believe I had decided to do this. Heading somewhere with a group of barely familiar people, without fully understanding the risks to my life. Adult skepticism made it hard to take everything seriously. It all seemed so make-believe. Soon we'd wander among the old houses, find nothing, and go our separate ways. Suddenly, we found ourselves in a strange place. A narrow alley, gray walls, old trash bins long out of use. I had been here before. The alley looked colorless, everything around so pale. Then I saw a familiar item on the asphalt, and, as if mesmerized, squeezed forward. There lay a cassette player. It was my player, a black and gray body with the word stereo and a gum sticker. On it, a cheerful orange skull with 2 bones, and in the corner of the player, a crack darkened and bloodstains gleamed. I can't believe it's still here, My voice came out strangely high-pitched, almost childlike. I bent down, reached out my hand, and was surprised at how thin my fingers had become. It was the hand of a teenager. My breath caught. I looked around and saw that the people next to me were no longer 40-somethings, but 13 to 14-year-old teenagers. Everett had turned into the light-haired boy I remembered. Next to him stood Isabella, a pretty girl with freckles on her face. Charles had once again become a short, round-faced guy with tousled hair. Bearded Arthur was now a boy with long bangs. Only the eyes remained the same, still huge and blue. And bald, chubby Benjamin was now a slim, curly-haired teenager. All of them were dressed as they used to be, baggy jeans, sneakers, and track jackets. And I found myself wearing my old 90s jacket. The guys were examining themselves and each other in amazement. "Are we kids again?" Benjamin exclaimed. His voice was filled not with fear, but rather delight. He touched his thick, curly hair and felt his flat stomach. "How slender I am. Everett, was I really like this?" Isabella marveled, spinning in place as if she couldn't believe she had once again become a small, fragile girl. Finding herself back in the form of a teenager was a real miracle. What an unexpected surprise. The sorrow of the years lived slipped off me, like an old, thick skin. I felt as I had in childhood before my birthday. Such thrilling excitement, such a thirst for adventure, and boundless optimism. I took a deep breath. My heart awakened almost forgotten feelings. Freedom, youth, and life. Quiet, focus, everyone," Arthur said, now in a young boyish voice, no longer hoarse. "Let's split up and search for him. Don't be afraid. Imagine you're in a game. The necessary items or weapons will definitely come to hand. And if you see someone who looks like me, shout immediately and call the others." We passed through an alley and found ourselves on a wide, foggy street. A scene from another time. Old concrete buildings, vintage cars, empty courtyards, and a shattered newspaper kiosk. "Let's go in different directions," Arthur commanded confidently. "I'm not letting Isabella go," Everett objected, taking his friend's hand. Arthur nodded. "Fine. The main thing is don't waste time. Let's find him." Each of us went our separate ways. I wandered down the sidewalk, letting my feet lead me. My soul was torn by conflicting emotions, a mix of sheer terror and the need to battle dangerous curiosity. I didn't want to put on headphones and play music on my player. A teenage spirit had awakened in me. I felt ready to take risks and fight. Suddenly, I noticed a small cardboard box. It sat on the sidewalk as if it were saying, "Open me." I approached and nudged the lid open with my foot. Inside was just a glass pepper shaker with a silver lid, containing black ground pepper. "How seriously?" I laughed. I took out what was inside the box. "Necessary items or weapons will definitely come to hand," Arthur had said. That meant this place truly responded to thoughts. And then, as if answering my laughter, I heard that all too familiar wild breathing in the distance. The clatter of heels on asphalt echoed. A tall shadow emerged ahead. Then, out of the fog, she appeared, the child eater, that terrifying woman. She was rushing down the sidewalk, her giant mouth open, her eyes bulging. I didn't hesitate. I threw the pepper shaker at her. It hit her mouth, landing square in her wide throat. The tall woman immediately stumbled, falling on a flat surface, clutching her neck. She began coughing violently. The child eater choked right before my eyes, and I just watched as she writhed, gasped, and shook uncontrollably. Then suddenly, with a fit of coughing, bloodied bones started spilling out of her throat. It was her own skeleton. Her skull rolled down the road, while ribs and vertebrae piled into a tall heap. Having expelled her insides, the child eater collapsed onto the asphalt like an empty leather sack. Her body lay in folds. Her eyes no longer moved. She was dead. I realized I had done everything right when I imagined the child eater having a deadly allergy to pepper. That had been my fleeting thought after Arthur told us to invent weaknesses for our monsters. He was right. Foxglove Street was a nightmare we could control. All it took was belief. Terrifying events were unfolding around us. A distant explosion rumbled, and blue, jelly-like blobs began falling from the sky. Someone else from the group had defeated their monster. Behind me, Isabella screamed, "He's here! Guys, grab him!" Everett shouted. I rushed back into the thick fog where the battle was raging. As I ran, I saw Everett, Isabella, and Benjamin picking up stones from the ground and mercilessly hurling them at someone. Their target was a boy who looked like Arthur, but he appeared slightly different. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes glowed blue, and his fingers were sharp and shiny, like shards of glass. The boy desperately shielded himself from the flying stones and shouted, "Stop! Stop! Enough!" But the group was unstoppable. One stone struck his face, and it shattered as if it were made of glass. A broad crack zigzagged from his forehead to his chin. Suddenly, Arthur approached the crowd of enraged teenagers and shouted, "Stop it, guys. He's mine." Everyone immediately froze and stepped aside. Arthur walked forward, stood opposite his double, and said, "You are my reflection. You obey me. Copy my movements." He didn't even finish speaking when the half-broken mirror double assumed the same pose and began silently moving its lips, mimicking him. Reverse became Arthur's puppet. I and the other kids silently watched to see what would happen next. The boy commanded with authority, "Now go back to where you came from." A large chunk fell off the face of his double with a crash. It hit the asphalt and shattered into hundreds of tiny shards. Reverse was hollow inside, like a Christmas ornament. He obeyed the command, turned around, and walked off into the distance, gradually dissolving into the thick fog. Arthur looked at us with a smile and said, "Thanks, guys. That's it. You can go home now, but I'll see him off. Let him return to his mirror world. We'll wait for you," I promised. The boy shook his head. "No, this place will now always be the boundary between two worlds. Someone has to guard it. I'll stay here so that Reverse never returns." His voice was quiet and somber, but there was no sadness in his eyes, only calm, as if he had already accepted his fate. "You'll stay here forever?" asked Isabella sympathetically. "I'll be a little lonely, but I'm used to that," replied Arthur with feigned cheerfulness. "But on the bright side, I won't have to grow old. You'll all turn into grandpas and grandmas, but I won't. And, by the way, when you're old, hunched over, and almost at the end of your days, come back here and keep me company." "Great idea," said Benjamin. "Anyway, I gotta go, guys." "Thanks, everyone," Arthur shouted as he ran off into the distance after the disappearing figure of Reverse. That boy was leaving our lives, not forever, but only for a while, or so it seemed to us. We watched him until he vanished into the fog, and only then turned back. I walked pensively behind everyone, watching how funny my skinny arms swung and listening to the chatter of the kids. They quickly got distracted and started talking about all sorts of things. Charles boasted like a child. I was walking down the street, saw a box lying there, and inside it was a stick of dynamite. I immediately realized I could use it to blow up the cold fiend. And then he appeared, a sticky blue monster, and the dynamite's fuse lit itself, so I threw it at him. The dynamite stuck to him, and he tried to pull it off, but no luck. The fuse burned down. Boom. Did you hear it? He was blown to pieces, and then jelly rain started falling from the sky. I poured acid on the skinless monster, Benjamin bragged in response, and chunks of meat fell off of him. "EW," said Isabella. Everett gently took her hand and quietly asked, "Isabella, when we turn back into adults, will you marry me?" The girl turned away, blushing so hard that her freckles disappeared. "That's unexpected and very sweet, but I'll think about it with an adult's head Okay. Of course, Everett replied. The exit was near. Could this really be the end? The end of our adventure? I wish we could stay in this strange world a little longer. But alas, it was time to return. Family and boring adult responsibilities awaited us at home. My friends and I crossed the narrow alley and found ourselves back outside Foxglove Street. I felt the weight of my body and an ache in my back. Benjamin was bald and pot-bellied again. Charles was once more the tallest, and the scars on his face intertwined with deep wrinkles. Even Isabella had transformed from a girl into a beautiful woman, and gray-haired Everett looked at her with the same love in his eyes. Everyone seemed to have already forgotten that Arthur had to stay there, at the boundary of two worlds, so that nightmares in the real world would no longer trouble us or our children. In my hand, I still held an old cassette player, a long-lost, now rediscovered favorite object, the last greeting from my childhood. I wondered, had the batteries run out? I put on the headphones and pressed play. The song I hadn't finished listening to so many years ago started playing in my ears.